Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Paint Along afternoon or Paint Along with Acrylics. My name's Christine, and I will be leading you today in today's painting exercise. Today we're going to be painting a scene from one of my travels in Japan. Now, if you've ever traveled anywhere, traveling is a great time to take pictures and be inspired by new things. This is a fall scene. I don't know if anyone's ever tried persimmons, but in Japan, in the fall, they'd light up the trees like these big, beautiful orange globes. And yeah, they're just beautiful to see. I was lucky enough to be able to visit a whole orchard of these. So I'm going to start painting. Well, I'll go through my usual start methods or start routine, but here's our painting for today. I will talk a little bit about Japan while we go along and paint some beautiful, delicious persimmons. Okay, so what do you need today? Today I have my canvas. It's about it's an 8 by 10. I wouldn't recommend doing anything much bigger than this because you're going to get, it's going to take a little longer. That's all, and use more materials. I have my brushes. There's nothing fancy about them. They came in a beginner set with my paints here. So I've got just a selection of blues and greens, reds, some browns. And I had to buy another white because I've used that up. I have a cup full of water here for cleaning my brushes and some paper towels. And I have my little palette here. Okay, so that's all the equipment you need. I'll just say one thing about cleaning up at the end, like usual. If we get to the end of the program and you notice you have, blobs of wet paint all over your palette, please don't wash it all down the sink. Try to, wipe it off onto a paper towel and throw that in the garbage. And that way we end up with less paint in our water supply. Also for your brushes, when you're cleaning them, I always just, sort of swirl it in the water a little bit and then dab it on the paper towel like this. And then after the program, I give them a full wash in the sink. You don't want to leave your brushes sort of sitting in the water, point down. That'll sort of damage your tips and then the brushes won't last as long. So all right. I think we're ready to get started. So just give me a second while I change the camera. There we go. You get a new perspective on my workspace here and how I've set everything up. So this picture was taken, this is from a picture, I should say. This is my copy. The picture was taken on a early November day in 2009. That was the year I lived in Japan for 18 months. Beautiful, crisp weather. Japan, or at least where I was in Japan, which was sort of further south on the island, it doesn't really get cool or crisp until November. Fall doesn't really come until November, depending sort of on where you are in Japan. If you're further north or if you're in the mountains, fall comes much sooner, but this was in Fukuoka, down on the one of the smaller islands, one of the more southern islands. So November was the time for getting things done, or November was the time that fall, you really started to notice it. All right. And as always, I have a comments section. If you comment at the bottom of the screen, I'll see it, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions you may have. And take your time. One of the great things about having this on video is that if you make a mistake, if you need to pause, just want to take a step back or even run to the bathroom, you can do that. Okay, so I'm going to start with my underpainting today. Actually, I'm going to shed a little bit more light on this. And this side too. Okay. So we're going to start today with our underpainting. And I think I'm going to do my underpainting in purple. So I'm going to use ultramarine blue and crimson red. I'm just going to stick them together. I've got a bigger canvas. I might need a little bit more. So make a larger batch. And I'm going to take my middle fat brush here and just mix up some purple. Now, why have I chosen purple? Because it's going to contrast nicely with the orange of the Persimmons. I'm going to have a blue sky, a purple outline, and bright orange Persimmons. And feel free, again, to mix up a big batch of this. We will use it all. There we go. So that's about the color I want. And we'll start by painting this branch. All right, so we've got this branch, a big Y. It comes up. And then the fruit is actually attached to the sort of second branch that comes down and gives off little bits of fruit. So, or little stems for the fruit to hold on to. All right. So the branch starts down around here and goes up to about, let's say, here. And it's kind of lumpy, so throw in some lumps. There we go. Big kind of a lump here at the bottom. Big lump there. And we start heading up. Before we get too far, I'm going to run into our first persimmon, so I'm just going to do that as a circle here. Now, if you've ever had persimmons in Canada, I find they just don't do the fruit justice. Wherever they're imported from, maybe it's just a different kind, I'm not sure, but persimmons in Japan were juicy and sweet. And I find they're just not, they're kind of woody and just pale in comparison when you buy them here, sadly. So here we go, working on this branch up. And in Japan, fruit is an art. Actually, there's a big culture of gifting fruit, giving fruit as a gift. And it's kind of funny, you go into the store and you see, like one small bunch of grapes or whatever for $20, and you go, oh my God, that's an insane price for one bunch of grapes. But the purpose is not to buy it for you to enjoy, for you to eat at home as a snack or whatever. The purpose is that you spend $20 and you buy this fruit as a gift for someone. And the $20 pretty much guarantees that every fruit, every little grape in that whole bunch is just going to taste like manna from heaven. I don't know what witchcraft they do, but somehow every fruit just tastes amazing when you pay $20 for it. I don't know. But yeah, so that was a treat sometimes in Japan to get this fruit. Sometimes you managed to get it on clearance. And when you did, it was delicious. So I filled out my lumpy branch. I'm going to start on the branch that comes down and sort of spits off little stems for the fruit to hang off of. So that's going to come down like this. It's kind of fat up here and it gets thinner later on. And goes off the bottom there. And the color might be a little bit off, so if you're just joining us, this is a purple color that I'm doing my underpainting in. I made it from an ultramarine blue and a crimson red. You feel free to use whatever blue and red you like. It'll change the tone and color of your painting just a little bit, but that's not so bad. Variations are great. So I'm just going to rinse off this brush now. Dab it here. Actually, maybe I can zoom this down without losing. There we go. So give it a wipe. Ah. Okay. Shouldn't leave those open. That was not the smartest idea. Okay. So looking back at our sketch here, we've got lots of groups of persimmons, bunches up in the trees, this area, this tree particularly, and over here, and all in here. So I'll fill those into my sketch or into my painting. Let's see. Come up over here. I'm using a thinner brush now. Again, this is, just the sketch, so it doesn't have to have all the details, but I love drawing these delicious round fruits here. They've got these, they look kind of spiky. They're long, thin branches kind of coming off. And then down here on this side, there's more again. And again, just have that branch come down. Ooh. We can stick, I think, another branch there. Now this is the background. You can, honestly, I sort of make this part up a little bit and just put in some fruit and some sticks wherever it seems like it'll look good. All right. We'll get more into detail about that when we actually do the coloring. But I love having this purple color in. You'll see sort of how it pops against the orange and the green and the blue of the sky a little later on. So that's our sketch for now. I'm going to grab one of my flat brushes here. So flat brush, it has sort of a thin one way, fat the other, and a square top. That's how we know it's a flat brush. Going to put on a drop of white. And I'm going to throw a bit of yellow in here. Now, why am I adding yellow to the purple? Well, I've still got some purple that's usable. And adding yellow to the purple is going to make it brown. And that's the color I want for the branches. And I think it's pretty good. I think I want just a little bit of blue in there. So I'll add that blue color. It's a kind of a cool brown. There we go. I don't think I have enough of it. So just so I don't run out halfway through, the color is pretty close to raw umber, so I'll add some of that brown. If you have another brown, feel free to add it. Try to keep the paint together. And again, it's a little bit too orangey. Add some blue in. Last time. So I'm trying to achieve kind of a cool brown color. That's dark and closer to almost a gray or a black. I think that's as close as I need to be. So now I'm going to start on the branch. Now the branch has all this, wonderful light and dark spots, and we're going to get those, but I'm going to just start by painting it with a good thick coat of brown. And maybe not too thick. But we'll start with the brown. And if I've still got wet paint on the underpainting and I'm picking up some of that, that's okay. So I'm going to take my other flat brush here. And while my brown is still wet, I'm going to sort of run it through a little bit of the white. And now I'm going to start brushing on highlights wherever I want them. So and this mixing effect is called wet on wet because we're mixing wet underpaint with wet paint as we add it. So and go over the lumps, sort of do some spotting wherever you want to highlight. Think of where your light's coming from. It's sort of coming down kind of from this angle, so make this side a little bit lighter to emphasize that. Moving on to this section over here. Now with wet on wet, you do have to work a bit quickly. I forgot my spray bottle today, but if you notice that your work is drying out too fast, you can take your spray bottle and spray a mist over your painting, and that will help keep things dry. I'm sorry, that will help keep things moist and movable. There we go. And switch back and forth. A little bit around the neck. You can just switch brushes as you like. Ooh. Blending in. Sorry, I've not been watching my comments. Hi, Andrea. Thank you for joining us. All right, I'll move on to this upper part of the branch, remembering which part is branch and which part is sky. Sometimes that's half the battle, is remembering your own sketch. So I lived in Japan for pretty much the whole year of 2009. I got there in February of 2009, and then I left, I think it was actually the first day of April in 2010. So, which is over 10 years ago now. I've been back once. It was actually pretty weird because I learned so much about Japan, so much that I just don't use in my everyday life, like speaking Japanese. But it was amazing how much all of that came back while I was there for that, just like the short couple months I went to visit in 2017 again. So. And of course, for that whole year I was in Japan, I was teaching English. It's sort of one of the easier jobs to get overseas if you're someone from an English-speaking country. A few more dabs on this lumpy branch here. There we go. All right. So now still keeping these same sort of two brushes. I'm going to go down. Remember, this is that branch that's actually supporting the persimmons. And it runs right over here and goes down. And these little supports, like here and there. And this is a fairly smooth branch. So I'm putting a line of light down the middle. And not mixing in as I'd sort of hoped it would. So I'll go back over it again with the brown. There we go, until we get some of that mixing action. Now for my white, I'm using titanium white. It tends to be a very strong white. It'll overpower other colors quite quickly. I've mentioned if you want to invest in a white that's going to make your colors lighter, but not sort of overpower them, then zinc white is kind of a good color for that. Although you end up using a lot of it for very little results. Okay. Couple more highlights here. Just delicate. All right. And then I'm going to brush or clean off these two brushes. Give them a good wipe. Get all the paint off. So I mentioned this Persimmon field was near Fukuoka, which is a city sort of on the north edge of Kyushu, between Kyushu and Honshu. Those are, the Honshu is the big Japanese island, and Kyushu is the smaller one. One of the smaller islands. All right. I'm going to use up a bit of this brown paint, just going over my sketch and putting in some brown branches where I had fully purple. I'll just give that sketch some variety there. So I didn't live anywhere near Fukuoka. I actually lived sort of closer to Kyoto and Osaka, in a place called Okayama. Just a little water there. And I was fortunate enough to be along the main train line, the Shinkansen line. Japan is great because it's so accessible by train, by bus, and by bike. You come to Canada as a visitor, for example, and you just about, you can't do anything outside of Toronto or the large cities if you don't have a car. But in Japan, it's very easy to catch a train to, places away from the busy crowds and all the touristy sites and everything, and just find your own, find less hectic places to be, I should say. There. All right. So I finished my branches. I've got sort of brown and white highlights here, but you can see that I've still got the purple color peeking out around the edges. And that's exactly how I wanted it. Now we're going to go add the orange for the persimmons, and you're going to see sort of how that pops out. And then it'll do even more so when I add the blue. So I'm going to use my vermilion is halfway to orange anyway. So I'm going to use that for my red. And I'm going to use the lemon yellow I have as my yellow. Although this is getting pretty low. So I'll keep my backup of cadmium yellow, which this is a tube that is years and years old. But I'll keep that on hand just in case I need it. So persimmons, one of the great things about them is the great varieties of color that you can get when they're a pale yellow. When they're sort of, I guess, early ripe, they're pale orange, not yellow, orange, and less sweet and a little harder. And then as time goes on, they go from pale orange to a much deeper orange to a full-on red, and then sometimes even a red that's so close, that's almost close to black, sort of like a red rose or something. So, and that variety just makes it, makes them very beautiful with the different shades of colors. I'm going to start off with these with just like an orange, sort of middle of the ground orange. And I'm going to just go over my whole persimmon here. 1, 2, applying the paint thick so I can mix in some other colors later, if I can work quickly enough before it dries. 3. You know what? And I think I wasn't thinking when I sketched this one in, because I see now compared to my sketch, that's supposed to be in the middle there. It's okay. We'll improvise. So here I've got my pure vermilion. I'm going to throw this over the bottom here to give the persimmons a bit more of a red hue at the bottom. And my yellow won't do much now, I think. But I'll see if I can't use my flat brush to sweep on some yellow highlights as well. There we go. Give them a little bit of that sort of fire here. Variation of color that's nice to see. Okay. And then last but not least, I'm going to mix. I still have a bit of brown that's left. If you don't have any brown, you can add a darker red, or even just burnt umber, whatever shade of brown you have. And I'm just going to go around the bottom here. Give them that shade shadow effect. Okay. And so now we've got the basis for our persimmons. Using those colors now, I'm going to take my brush here, my larger round brush, and I'm going to start filling in all these guys in the back, the smaller ones in the distance. And I'll probably make some more up as I go. It's a very full orchard. See, I'm not really choosing any particular color, just going over, grabbing whatever color my brush can find, and drawing in some persimmons. Just circles, really. Oh, I have to remember this section up here too. All right. Well, that might be the very end of this yellow tube here. That's all right. I want a few more pale persimmons. Got a lot of dark ones. Okay. So now that we've got sort of the orange explosion done, we're going to move on to the leaves. Now I have two shades of green. The Viridian, it's quite bright and vibrant. It has a tendency to move towards like almost the neon green. And this is a little bit more sedate and almost never vibrant. So I'm going to start with the Viridian. And if I need to tone things down, I might use some of the hooker's green. And I'll need my yellow here. And so that's not bad. I'm going to tone it down, I think, with some orange. So if you've got orange on your palette, you can reuse it. There we go. That's nice. And then I'm just going to start dabbing in places where there's white and I would like to see green. So if you look, I've got a few leaves in the trees I'll have to add in later. But most of this bottom half of the painting is all, green foliage and vibrant persimmons. So a little bit too brown. So, and what I'm doing is I'm sort of adding, if I want the leaves a little bit yellow, I go for yellow. If I want them a little bit greener, I grab some more of the green. And if I want things less vibrant, I swipe in a little bit of orange, and that tones things down. And being fairly even in how I try to disperse the different colors. Mostly trying to keep some of the light colors above and some of the darker tones sort of down low. But there's always exceptions, so make sure you do the opposite sometimes as well. For leaves that are on top, even though they're leaves that are, I suppose, in the foreground. And I'm working in close to the branches in my underpainting, but you'll notice that I'm not actually going right sort of over and trying to eliminate all the purple. I actually like having these little bits of purple peeking through. If you've studied any color theory says that when you have an opposite color, two opposite colors next to each other, they kind of pop. So opposite colors are green and red. If you put green next to red, it pops. Yellow and purple, orange and blue. So giving that little bit of purple with the sort of yellowish tones of the persimmon just kind of make them pop out. And then, of course, you've got the green and the reddish persimmons, and you've got, later on, we'll add blue in the sky, and that will really just bring everything out. So. I think we're getting to the point where my orange is just about done. It's just about dried. I'll have to think of an alternate tool soon. So just working on some of the leaves here. Sometimes when your brush gets kind of dry like that, you can dip it in a bit of water and it'll bring your paint back to life. Too much and you'll end up with see-through paint, and that's not always good, but just want to extend it a little bit. Bring this up a little bit. There we go. I need a little bit more red here. Get the blue and the red together, or the green and the red together, and now I've got this sort of very dark green color here that I can put down in the lower parts of the painting or use for any areas where I feel like there's a deep shadow. Need a bit more. Yeah, the red overpowered the green. Add in a bit more green. There we go. There's a good shadow tone. So color theory again says that, if you add a color to its opposite, you're going to get something that starts to go towards black. So mixing green and red of certain varieties, mixing yellow and purple, or blue and orange. These colors are going to slowly sort of, if you mix them, they're going to try to form something blackish. There we go. And I mean, of course, you can always add black to a color if you want to make it black. But visually, mixing your own black tends to make things more visually interesting. Because when you get a pile of almost black but not quite black tones together, I just want a little bit more up in this area. You tend to, your eye will notice that even subconsciously, and that sort of gives it visual variety that makes it visually appealing. So it's not all one shade, it's not all one tone. There. Okay. So there's the bottom of our painting here. And what we're left with now is the sky. And I'm going to start my sky by drawing in the clouds. So I'm going to take my white here, give myself a blob of that. Generous blob of that. More generous blob of that. I'm being extra generous because I know I'm going to need the white even after I'm done the clouds. I'm going to need it for mixing blue together to make sort of the sky blue. So you could be generous in your white. You don't actually have to worry too much about that. Okay. So decide where I want to put my clouds here. Now, let's move that over. In the sketch here, I've sort of got one down in this corner. So I'll kind of put one down there. It goes in behind. Now you might be wondering, wouldn't it be easier to draw the sky first and then draw everything else over top? And that might be. Put one down here. But what kind of happens when you do that is your paint, unless you've got a super, super opaque, thick layers of paint, you're going to start getting the blue bleeding through on everything. And I've just... That wasn't cleaned very well either. Okay, if you do make a mistake, a little bit of water from a brush. Uh-oh. A little bit of extra paper towel to suck up the water. And there you go. Yeah, so unless you have very, very opaque paint, if you paint the sky first, then everything in your picture sort of has this blue undertone. And it's going to make your oranges pop less. And so on. So, and then one. And I'd have one just sort of popping up behind here. One over there. The other thing about clouds that's neat is they tend to be more uniform than you'd think. So not more uniform, but more patterned. So when I was first starting out painting, I'd be like, well, I have to have one up here and one here and one here because it's random and they can't be, they have to be random, but they're actually, they space themselves fairly evenly in the sky, or you get, like the wisps. So here we've got a lot of foreground, the background, the clouds. I've got here, 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 here that I have to remember. The clouds aren't going to, I'm going to put a little bit of white down here too. No one can really see how well you've positioned your clouds or things like that. So I'm putting a little bit of white down here because, of course, the horizon kind of dithers downwards. So I'll go over this with blue, but having the white on there beforehand is going to make it a little bit more easier to keep light. So for blue, I'm going to use this cobalt blue for the sky. It's already got sort of a nice sky color to it. You can use any blue. You'll get different tone results depending on what blue you use. Ultramarine tends to kind of move a little bit towards purple. So keep that in mind. I'm going to mix a little bit of blue, a little bit of white, and just start applying it around my clouds. So now I have to remember where my clouds are. So in this technique of adding in the sky last, I don't know if you'd say it's a Canadian technique exactly, but it was first pointed out to me that this is how Tom Thomson, who was, well, he died before the group of seven formed, but was sort of in with that group. This is how he did a lot of his sketches. Was he would paint the foreground and the leaves and the valleys and the forests and all that, and then he would throw the sky on top. So if you're ever at the McMichael Gallery in Kleinburg, when we're allowed to go visit galleries again, or even the AGO in Toronto, have a look at Tom Thomson's skies and see how he sort of puts that together. And so now I'm working up to some of the darker blues here. I've kept some white and kept it light around the bottom, right? But now I can start moving up to sort of the deeper sky blue. Now, if you're having a lot of trouble around the leaves, you might try using a slightly thinner brush. This flat brush has, like a way I can make it that's thin and a way that's fat, so it helps me go fast in the open spaces, and I can be a little bit more narrow into the small spaces. But if that's not working for you, then you can just use a smaller brush. Keep that light up there. Yeah. Once again, got it on top. So a little bit of water on my brush. Dab with a paper towel. And we're back on our way. So I think everyone has this impression of Japan being a very crowded place. It's very high tech and things. And it was interesting living there because you could actually see, in a lot of cases, it was the opposite. Back in 2009, there wasn't a debit machine to be found in any store. You did everything almost with cash. So that was kind of interesting. I think they've caught up a bit, but in many ways in cell phone technology, they're light years ahead of us, it seems. But in other ways, they're not as cutting edge as we seem to think, or as the popular stereotypes might suggest. It's also not really crowded. Like if you're in Tokyo, Tokyo's crowded. Osaka's crowded. The big cities are crowded, as all big cities are. But in a lot of other, if you just take a train and go outside of the big cities, you realize that the Japanese people tend to live in these clumps. They'll clump around a train station, or they'll clump around, mostly around train stations. They'll clump around train stations as sort of the main way you get around over there. So once you get outside of that clump, you realize that you're sometimes just in wide open country. And you get rice paddies, and the mountains are always, they live on the flats between the mountains, but the hills themselves are very much not occupied or not inhabited, which means that there's a lot of green space in Japan too, outside of the city. It's just a matter of, getting out there to it. Okay. I've got a lot of white paint left over, so I'm going to take my round brush again. And I'm going to go over some of the cloud spots here. It's hard to see white on white, so do the best you can and then come back and go over it. And yes, you can see there's a little bit of the blue mixing in with the white, but that's okay. Okay. And finally, I know we think of clouds as pure white, and you are happy if you want to. You can certainly leave them like that. No, that's all dried pretty hard. But if you want to be too much, go back and just add little wisps of other color. No, I don't like that green. Okay, what I really want to do is I want to add some purple into my clouds. Stop skirting the issue and just be honest. So, a little bit of the ultramarine, which tends towards purple anyway, a little bit of the crimson. Mix that around. I'm going to take even a finer brush, and this is just finishing touches. You don't have to do this, but make it mostly white. And just put those little hints of color into the clouds. Again, just visual variety. You won't even notice they're there unless you go looking for them, but your eyes will say, huh, that's interesting. And to go with the purple, or to go opposite the purple, again, a tiny bit of yellow. I mean, I've got white here. I might as well use it up. So just something a little bit warm. Nope, too strong. I mean, I don't know if the camera is even picking these up. It probably all looks like just white on white to you guys. So I'll stop in a second, but there we go. Maybe I'll do another cloud here down on the horizon. And there we are. So there's our finished painting, the Persimmons of Japan. I hope you enjoyed this, and if yours doesn't look quite like this, that's okay. I've been painting for many years, and this is all recorded, so take a step back, let things dry, and give it another shot. And if you ever want to, say, reuse a canvas, if you tried and it didn't work out, I reuse canvases when I'm done with them. Take a little bit of sandpaper, sand down the canvas to sort of remove any lumps, and then just paint over it with a white once you've wiped all the dust off with a wet rag. So here we go. Make sure my brushes are reasonably clean. And I will head off to a sink to do the rest of the cleanup. So there we go. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you had a good time creating a lovely piece of art and hearing a little bit about Japan while we were at it. My next paint along afternoon will be in the fall or in October, and we'll be doing a landscape. So look for that in the Waterloo Public Library program guide. And until then, have a great time. Take care. Keep painting.